Science fiction plucks from within us our deepest fears and hopes and shows them to us in rough disguise, the monster and the rocket. Hello and welcome to the Exalted March. This quote from science fiction author and essayist W.H. Auden is perhaps the best summary of what science fiction is truly meant to be, and in that way, it also captures an essential truth about Mass Effect. This quote was also included on the front page of the screenplay for the 1979 film Alien, directed by Ridley Scott and starring Tom Skerritt and Sigourney Weaver. Alien has often been considered one of the seminal works of modern science fiction for a variety of reasons, but especially because it, like Mass Effect, understood the essential truth in this quote and then expanded it out into a larger story and universe built on this principle. Science fiction plucks from within us our deepest fears and hopes and shows them to us in rough disguise. The monster and the rocket. What does it mean to pluck something from within us and then to show it to us in, quote, rough disguise? Those are especially specific word choices. What even is a rough disguise? It's essentially a disguise that's not particularly effective, but to show someone something in rough disguise, especially right after you just plucked that thing from within them, leads us to believe that the disguise, while necessary, isn't meant to hide the truth from that person. The disguise, the rough disguise, remember, is meant to be good enough that we don't have to confront head-on the real thing, but not so convincing that we can't surmise what's hiding behind the thin veil. It's meant to make the truth bearable. What truth, exactly? Our deepest fears and hopes. These aren't everyday casual fears either. Remember, these are the fears that had to be plucked from within us, the ones way down deep. At first glance, it might seem like hopes wouldn't need to be disguised like fears are, but that's not always true. Hope is audacious. Our deepest hopes, or the ones that are most ambitious and grand, can sometimes be hard to think about because it's painful to consider that they may never come true or that we're being misled by delusions of grandeur. Sometimes even hope needs a disguise, even if it's just a rough disguise to make the hope more graspable in our minds. The point is, you're ultimately supposed to be able to sense what's behind the rough disguise instinctually, with relative ease and perhaps even subconsciously. You know on a gut level what the monster and the rocket represent. But that's one of the things that's so great about this quote, is that it doesn't actually tell us what the deepest fears and hopes are. The monster and the rocket are the rough disguise, not the fears and hopes themselves. The fears and hopes aren't listed like inventory because in their disguised form they can be universal. More specifically, they can be infinite. Let's talk about the monster and the rocket. We'll start with the monster. The monster, and it is the monster. Not just any monster, it's the monster to end all monsters. It's the Omega monster and the oldest monster at the same time. It's the monster that existed before all the others, and it's the monster at the end of time. It's meant to be worse than the worst thing that you can possibly imagine. It's meant to be so awful it's paradoxical. It's Cthulhu, essentially. In Lovecraftian stories, Cthulhu is a cosmic deity. It's one of the great old ones. A reoccurring theme in Lovecraftian stories is that the scale and the events of the cosmos as a whole render hapless humans like us irrelevant. And if our paths should cross with a cosmic level being like Cthulhu or one of the other great old ones, it would most likely lead to us being dead or insane. And that's actually not a bad framework when considering the vast, infinite, and mostly unknowable reaches of outer space. That is, as Star Trek iconically described, the final frontier. The epochs of human history have often been stitched together by connection points of great exploration and discovery. Human beings have had to necessarily confront the unknown and chart the wilderness in order to expand our society. The instinctual core fear that we all have is what's over the mountain and around in the next valley. But also the instinctual core drive that we all have is to find out what's over the mountain and in the next valley. It's the thing that could kill you, but also elevate you, your society, and all your future generations. But in order to reach that potential good, you have to face the possibility that you might find something terrible. In our terrestrial history, this may have meant predators or rivals or other hazards, and those are all bad enough, but those aren't really the deepest fear. The deepest fear is something you have no idea how to confront, something you have no idea how to even conceptualize. It's the worst thing you can possibly imagine, except worse than that. It's Cthulhu. It's not a monster, it's not a problem, it's the monster. It's the problem, a problem dangerous and seemingly predatory that comes after you in the night. Now let's talk about the rocket, because the rocket is the contrast. It's the opposite of the worst thing you can imagine. You might think that the opposite of the worst thing you can imagine is the best thing you can imagine, but thankfully you'd be wrong, because it's even better than that. If you choose to brave the unknown, if you choose to scale the mountain and push into the next valley, if you choose to venture into the cold, infinite expanse of space and you aren't destroyed by the monster, you might find paradise. You might find a utopia. You might find the best thing you could possibly imagine, but it's even better than that. Because you might find another one. You might find 2 utopias, or even 3 or 4. You might find an infinite number of utopias. And in a universe where there exists the possibility of an infinite number of utopias, the best thing you can possibly imagine isn't just the utopias themselves, but the vehicle by which you discover them. The best thing you can possibly imagine, therefore, is the vehicle for infinite discovery. That is the rocket. That's our deepest hope. Now you might think to yourself, well wait, if the best thing is not a utopia but an infinite number of utopias, then why isn't the worst thing not a monster but an infinite number of monsters? And that's a good question. The answer is that it only takes one monster of sufficient terribleness to kill you, or for that matter, while we're conceptualizing monsters so terrible we can't fully conceptualize them, it only takes one monster of sufficient terribleness to kill you, everyone you know and don't know, and every living thing in the known universe. At that level of terribleness, while it is technically true that an infinite number of such a creature is worse than just one, it becomes a moot point. The opposite, however, is not true. If we were able to discover an infinite number of utopias, then future generations can continue to expand in a way that's nearly limitless. Even if we reach the absolute peak of society, if time is infinite, then there's always a way to continue expanding the length of that peak society. The potential exists for greater upside than downside. And that's a crucial distinction, and it's why the question about infinite monsters is such a good one. You should be asking whether or not the potential rewards outweigh the risks, and they do. And that is one of the single greatest truths that we can recognize as humans, that it's worth risking your comfort and safety and life to venture into the unknown and discover things. With so much already discovered here on Earth, there only exists 2 true unknown frontiers, one physical and one conceptual: space and new ideas. We can push further and further out into space, but we can also push deeper into new complex ideas and philosophies, make new scientific discoveries, or even find out something true about ourselves. These abstract areas of unknown are still new frontiers, even if they don't physically exist, and they still do also present potential catastrophic risks or near infinite reward. It takes bravery to confront this conceptual frontier, similar to how it takes bravery to confront the last physical frontier of space. And this is, yet again, another important realization that these 2 frontiers are necessarily intertwined. If braving the cold, unknown reaches of space is something that you have set in your sights, then you will also at some point have to necessarily face the unknown inside of yourself, or untangle a previously unknowable mystery in science, or answer a dilemma once thought unsolvable, or confront some conceptual monster that no one had ever thought possible. All stories fundamentally recognize that this duality between external and internal conflict exists, but not all stories have the same manner of disguise as science fiction. And that's personally why I find sci-fi to be so cool. Monsters and rockets. And let me tell you, Mass Effect has got some really cool monsters and rockets. So, finally, let's talk about Mass Effect. I know this has all gotten a bit abstract. We're talking about Cthulhu and infinite utopias and conceptual frontiers, and that's all good and fine. But you've probably started to think, yeah, that's great. What does this specifically have to do with Mass Effect? And I'm so glad you asked, because if you're like me, you've been enjoying Mass Effect for over a decade now, and you may have even wondered to yourself, why do I like this game series so damn much? Well, because you're hardwired to respond to essential truths in stories, and science fiction shows you those truths roughly disguised so that you can digest more of it without being overwhelmed. And Mass Effect and its writers inherently understood this, so throughout the Mass Effect series, there's example after example of this thematic thread running through the story and triggering that part of you that wants to pay attention to this stuff. It's all of it, the essential truth of Mass Effect. When you start your journey in Mass Effect 1, your first mission is on Eden Prime, a planet described as an idyllic human colony, a paradise, a utopia, and it's under attack by the Geth, but also by a Reaper, a monster, or you could say a representation of the monster. If you just think about this concept, pause the video and take a few minutes to scan your memory for this thematic thread in the Mass Effect series. You're probably going to predict most of the examples I'm going to cite because it's consistently there over and over again. Again, part of this is storytelling 101, but the trappings of science fiction, the rough disguise of the monster and the rocket, make the themes more palatable because at first they seem novel and fantastic, but after reflection we realize, sometimes subconsciously, that these themes are the same essential truths handed down in all of the oldest stories. This is the epitome of genre writing. Genre excels not when it perfectly lays out the trite, expected tropes the genre is known for, not when it perfectly recaptures the iconography of an established franchise in its sequels, but when it understands it has the same responsibility as any other type of story: to tell us a truth that we need in order to be better people and a better society. That message shouldn't be heavy-handed, it shouldn't be pedantic, it shouldn't be dogmatic, it shouldn't be politically divisive. It should be essential. It should be the type of truth that, when tested over time, has successfully led to the betterment of all people and societies that have faithfully applied it over the course of centuries. That's what essential truth is. Genre stories that take essential truth and then cloak it in a rough disguise so that it gains the benefit of novelty and perhaps even make the audience awe and wonder, that's peak genre writing. And the fact that a video game series about aliens and spaceships can do that is nothing short of astonishing. So now that we've really got a solid understanding of that concept in play within Mass Effect, let's continue on with our first example to really drive it home. When you first land on Eden Prime, it's already under attack. The paradise is already being destroyed. This is important because the player character needs to fear the threat of the monster even when the paradise has already been discovered. Eden Prime is what happens when a monster encounters a utopia. There needs to be a threat that everything good already gained can be lost in order to create large-scale tension and conflict. If we compare this to the conceptual stakes we discussed earlier, the theoretical worst and best case scenarios of the ultimate monster or infinite utopias, we immediately see that the stakes of Mass Effect in Act 1 don't push all the way out to those maximums, and that's okay. Those best and worst case scenarios are meant to be conceptual. They're always sort of at play in science fiction because they're always at least somewhat possible. But for the purposes of plot and drama, it oftentimes makes for a better story to push things towards the middle where utopias contend with monsters in a tight tug of war that neither is totally winning. That's exactly what the opening of Mass Effect 1 does. It shows us a paradise in peril, under threat from a monster unknown due to its origins, but also under threat from a character like Saren or a group like the Geth, who are unknown in the sense that they're acting as agents of chaos. This is what the player, what Shepard and crew will be contending with all game, and Eden Prime does a great job of setting the expectation for this. Seeing colonists from Eden Prime impaled on dragon's teeth pikes that convert them into Geth husks, horrible zombie-like creatures, seeing the colony outposts burning near and far, seeing the sky basically burn red, a stylistic choice they're sadly changing in the Mass Effect Legendary Edition remaster. All of it denotes a paradise lost and potentially a vision of the future across the galaxy if our heroes don't act. When you're done with Eden Prime, your next stop is the Citadel in the Serpent Nebula of the Milky Way galaxy, the seat of galactic power held by the predominant galactic species. The Citadel is another paradise, and perhaps the apex paradise in the galaxy. The Citadel is pristine, at least at a glance. Compared to Eden Prime, which was a paradise under siege, scenes in the Presidium area of the Citadel are the epitome of idyllic sci-fi settings. It's meant to show just how good the utopias can be. But there's something else interesting about the Citadel. It's filled with monsters. And not like the kind that we saw on Eden Prime. It's a different sort of monster. These monsters could almost be like humans. They're Elcor and Volus, they're Thorian and Krogan, Hanar and Asari, Salarian, and even the Keepers, the insect-like race that serve as support workers, keeping the Citadel running. Mass Effect is a story from the human perspective, and so therefore, at first, all these alien races could be suspected of being monsters. Of course, as we learn throughout the series, they're not really monsters. Kaidan puts this best during Mass Effect 1 when talking to Shepard. Kaidan's personal experience with aliens has led him to realize that they're not monsters and they're not so different or special when it comes to their motivations. As he puts it, quote, "They're jerks and saints, just like us." It's an interesting take from Kaidan and not entirely wrong, but it is specific to the context of the timeline in the Mass Effect universe. At that point, it had been 26 years since humanity first discovered the mass relay that allowed them to travel into more populated parts of the galaxy, and they inadvertently started a war with the Thorian race by trespassing in a dangerous part of Thorian territory. Humanity was at war with the Thorians. They're certainly dangerous, and at a time before humans even had a way of communicating with Thorians, they may as well have been the same as monsters. But what Kaidan is saying is that after the war, after methods of translation and negotiation had been put in place, decades after the conflict, well, sure, there's still tension, but the Thorians are no longer boogeymen. They're rivals, and perhaps even on the way to becoming allies. That's an incredible idea, the idea that what you thought was a monster was actually someone like you, and someone who could even be a friend down the line. Can you imagine what that's like from their perspective? Maybe to the Thorians, we were the monsters who crawl out from the dark, unknowable and terrible. The duality between friend and foe is an old idea in stories, but again, the trappings of science fiction, the contrast between the monster and utopia, alien foe versus alien friend, is what helps this seem novel and unique to us. If you're traveling through space and find another species that you can't talk to and therefore can't reason with, and you end up in a war with them, that's a fight for survival with an unknowable enemy. And if you encounter an alien species that's benevolent and peaceful and communicative, that might be an incredible boon for your species. What if they want to trade previously unknown knowledge or materials? What if they give you new technology and secrets of the galaxy out of a sense of duty to help newer, less advanced species, as is often the case with the Asari and Salarians in the Mass Effect universe, and they help your society greatly prosper? Well, that's almost like a utopian setting. Within the alien, there exists the possibility for a monster, or a gateway to the benefits of someone else's utopia. That's an incredible dichotomy, and it's a difference that can be greatly affected by the choices of you and your society. How you choose to treat the aliens. What a phenomenal idea for storytelling. A quick aside, in the most recent Mass Effect game to date, Mass Effect Andromeda, this incredible dichotomy has been wrongly reduced in a major way. Although conflict between alien species of the Milky Way galaxy still exists, the writers of the game opted for a feel-good premise that the different species have put aside most of their differences in order to be friends and cooperate in exploring a new galaxy. It's a fair enough idea that shared struggle could bring different societies together, but in Andromeda it feels hand-wavy and unearned. We lose way too much of the mysterious feel of aliens, and the themes of science fiction suffer for it in Mass Effect Andromeda. Even worse, many of the discoveries in Andromeda Galaxy rarely feel as alien as they should, and it deflates the entire premise of the game. There are moments, brief ones, where the mysterious feeling of an alien galaxy is captured incredibly well. They're just too brief and too rare. I mentioned this as an aside to illustrate how important this concept is to Mass Effect as a whole. If the essential truth of Mass Effect is the duality between monster and rocket, between monster and paradise or utopia, then that dichotomy is encapsulated in all of the alien species you encounter. And the Citadel is filled with them. They're everywhere, and many of the species have greater standing and political clout than humanity does. We're the new kids on the block, comparatively. Species like the Asari, the Thorians, and the Solarians are way ahead of us when it comes to territory and power at the start of Mass Effect 1, and while humanity is painted as an upstart, quickly making up for lost time, that also comes with its own set of drawbacks. Other species think of us as arrogant, wanting too much too soon, and often getting it. This makes the social and political landscape steep territory to traverse. One wrong step could start an unintended landslide, but you've no choice but to press on towards more stable ground. Again, this is incredible storytelling material, and it's part of the reason we all love this series from the moment we stepped foot on the Citadel for the first time. Whether you realized it or not, that was the moment, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that some part of you knew deep down what was behind the rough disguise of the monster and the rocket. It may have been Geth and a Reaper you fought against on Eden Prime. It may have been the Normandy that brought you to the paradise of the Citadel. But it was on the Citadel, talking to all the alien races and learning about our conflicts and our shared struggles, that you really knew, innately, about your own deepest fears and hopes. You were facing your deepest fears when staring down a Therian and hearing the hint of disrespect in their voice, sensing the burning desire for retribution when talking to a Krogan, the air of condescension when talking to a Solarian or an Asari, the subtle mote of jealousy when talking to a Volus. But despite that, you knew every species was a potential ally if you played your cards right. Because of the companions you gather in Mass Effect 1 and throughout the series, you get to see that potential play out and grow into not just powerful alliances, but meaningful friendships. We experienced the risk and potential of a galaxy through betrayal, romance, and friendships. How else could an infinite galaxy of peril and boon feel so real to us but through personal relationships? That all started on the Citadel. When you ask Mass Effect fans, when was the moment that you knew? When did you know you were absolutely in love with this fictional universe? Almost all of us say it was when we first set foot on the Citadel as Shepard. It was the major cross-section of all those potential monsters and all those potential utopias. It was the first place we ever went to with the Normandy, and the message was clear. This rocket opens the door to a wider and fantastic galaxy. When you leave the Citadel for the first time, everything is different. You now have a ship and a crew. You're the first human Spectre, the first of your species to be trusted with the power of acting out the will of galactic law and of the Galactic Council. A map of the galaxy literally lies before you, and you're free to simply choose where to go next. This is the moment where the essential truth of Mass Effect becomes cemented in our minds. Go anywhere, explore, face the unknown. You have your rocket, and monsters roam free. You can explore a number of unexplored planets and find interesting sites or quests or points of interest, but in addition to that, there are a few major destinations where the story of stopping Saren and the Geth will lead you. And each of those major destinations has their own examples of the essential truth of Mass Effect. You can pursue your major leads in any order, but the order I've always preferred is Therium, Pharaohs, and Novaria, followed by Vermeier 4th. We'll talk about the major destinations in Mass Effect 1 in that order. Therium is where we find Liara T'Soni, daughter of Matriarch Benezia, one of Saren's allies. Shepard and crew are hoping to find Liara on a remote Prothean dig site and see if she can't help find Saren through finding her mother. It leads us to one of the best companions throughout the Mass Effect trilogy, but it actually fails to communicate anything essential about Mass Effect's themes. For this reason, I find Therium to be the weakest of any of the major destinations in Mass Effect 1. If you didn't know, Therium was originally meant to be much larger in scope. It was going to contain a whole mining colony and be a hub for other shorter stories and be a bigger piece of the main plot. This section of the game had to be significantly cut due to the production schedule of the game. We'll never experience what Therium could have been, but as it is, it's short, narratively shallow, linear in terms of gameplay, and really just a serviceable way to get Liara onto your crew. Mass Effect 1 communicates its themes quite well, but it's not perfect, and Therium is a prime example of a section in the story that doesn't do anything to contribute to the thematic resonance. After Therium, I usually go to Pharaohs and the human colony of Zhu's Hope. Zhu's Hope is a small settlement founded and run by Exogeny, an interstellar corporation specializing in exploration and colonization. They established Zhu's Hope on Pharaohs because of ancient Prothean ruins littering the surface of the planet, abandoned crumbling cities of a precursor race whose empire once spanned the galaxy. Or at least, that's what they tell everyone. The real purpose of Zhu's Hope is far more insidious. You see, Pharaohs and Zhu's Hope are not a utopia. They're a lair for a monster that lurks under the supposed utopia. Exogeny created a creature of immense power, an ancient sentient plant form they've called the Thorian, or also Species 37. Species 37 is connected to the planet itself through a massive sensory network of plant life, and it uses this network to release spores into the air and relay telepathic signals to the life form that unknowingly breathe in the spores. There's a subtle pain feedback loop, and the Thorian begins to essentially mind control the residents of Zhu's Hope, turning them into thralls. Exogeny, far from being concerned about this development, decided it would be a good idea to run an experiment using Zhu's Hope colonists as test subjects to see how they responded to the mind control spores of the Thorian, while the Exogeny scientists tried to develop a way to harness or recreate this mind control feat for themselves. Where once there was a vast city of a prosperous species on Pharaohs, now there was a place where unwitting souls went to their doom, mind-controlled by an ancient creature and helped along by their corrupt corporate employer, all for profit and gain. This is, yet again, another finer, more nuanced example of the monster from our deepest fears. The Thorian is literally a giant, terrible monster, but a potential utopia that's really just a disguise for the lair of a monster is an even more specific fear, and especially awful because it manipulates our drive to find the real utopias. And in this case, it's not even necessarily the monster laying the trap, as we come to find out. The Thorian, while not exactly friendly towards humans or other aliens, didn't want anyone on its planet to begin with. It's Exogeny who have laid the colony of Zhu's Hope out like a trap for people hoping to find a new life and potential future there. Exogeny is attempting to enslave the monster as much as the monster is enslaving the colonists, and naturally it causes tremendous suffering for everyone involved. How it ultimately works out is up to the player. Mass Effect is a game about choices and agency, a feature of stories and games that is unique and not available in other major media. Some things will be unavoidable. You're going to have to kill the Thorian one way or another because it's ancient and powerful and thinks your every step is a transgression. But you can choose what to do about Exogeny leadership that ran the experiment and choose how to deal with the colonists who have been driven mad by the mind control of the Thorian and its subsequent death. You can wipe out everyone, stopping the monster but also essentially destroying any hope for the colony, or you can spare the corrupt leadership of Exogeny while still exposing their corruption and carefully subdue the insane mind-controlled colonists until they can receive proper treatment. You can stop the monster and preserve the potential for paradise. It's a good thing to give players choices because that agency further cements themes at play in your story, but what's more, it's incredible that the themes in Mass Effect are resilient enough to withstand player choice and remain intact. If you choose to wipe everyone out, the threat of the monster and what it cost everyone is even more evident. The price of losing the colony resonates with the same theme. But if you manage to save a chance for the colony, its importance is all the more emphasized, so the theme also resonates. This is brilliant writing. After Pharaohs, I usually then go to Novaria and the multi-corporation controlled landing zone of Port Hanshan. Novaria is a frozen, inhospitable world swept by constant ice and snowstorms covering the planet. Being outside, even in an environmental suit built to withstand the cold, would still kill you in minutes. It's a harsh, cold, bitter place, and inside the confines of Port Hanshan, it's only slightly less harsh. Novaria is controlled by multiple large interstellar corporations who desired a remote, out-of-the-way planet outside of galactic regulations in order to conduct risky research in the name of science and profit. Make no mistake about it, Novaria is not a paradise. Novaria is hell. A cold, treacherous, frozen hell where conniving people spawn monsters of their own making, hoping to set them on their rivals or sell them to the highest bidder. Novaria is, at least in part, meant to thematically represent hell. As you progress the main story, you travel to a remote laboratory and literally descend down into the lower levels to confront the heart of an experiment that caused a sentient species of insects known as the Rachni to lose their minds and become rabid attack troopers. Remember Liara, who we picked up on Therium and whose mother is an ally of Saren? Yeah, well, her mother, Matriarch Benezia, is the one behind this horrible experiment. She used her stake in a company operating illegally on Novaria to get this experiment approved in order to create mindless soldiers for Saren. As you descend further down into the hell of the experiment's facility, you finally make it to a place called the Hot Labs, where Benezia is. Shepard and Liara can confront her mother and find that while she is cold and distant, that her helping Saren was at least in part due to some sort of mind control method that Saren is employing. We had learned on Pharaohs that Saren had visited the Thorian before us, and it was partly because he was trying to learn more about mind control. Benezia regains enough of her own free will to denounce Saren, give Shepard a lead on how to find him, and apologize to her daughter before dying from her wounds sustained during our battle with her. In this way, Liara helps to redeem her mother. In mythology, it's a common trope for the hero of the story to travel into the underworld and redeem the spirit of his dead father, usually by making up for a character flaw or correcting a mistake of the prior generation. In this case, it's Liara who redeems the spirit of her mother, fitting for a journey through an icy, cold hell. But that's not all that's thematically resonant on Novaria. At the heart of the experiment, after dealing with Benezia, you also find the Rachni Queen, who spawned all of the Rachni you've been fighting to this point. Rachni have the ability to communicate telepathically with one another even across vast distances, and the Queen can control her subjects in this way. But the experiment done on Novaria damaged her children, altered them so they could be controlled by the scientists and not guided by the song of their mother, as their language is like a telepathic verse sung to each other. Because of this, you were always going to have to kill the Rachni children on Novaria, but when it comes to their mother, the Rachni Queen, again, you have a choice. You can treat her like a monster and kill her inside the confines of her prison in the lab on Novaria, or you can choose to see her like the other aliens, a dichotomy between monster and gateway to shared utopias. She begs for her release, in fact she almost demands it. This makes the decision uneasy, because although she claims she will retreat to a remote region of space and try to raise children who will be peaceful, you don't know if she's telling the truth. At this point, if you're not familiar with the lore of Mass Effect, I should mention that in the distant past, the Rachni did try to invade large portions of the galaxy to claim territory, as territorialism is somewhat inherent to their nature. The galaxy banded together to defeat them, and for a long time, they thought that the Rachni were extinct. Finding specimens of Rachni on Novaria, very much alive, was a shock. Most of the galaxy would not like the idea of a past monster returning. But the Queen says that she was only an egg then. Before she was even truly born, she heard, telepathically, the song of her people dying out in a war that almost led to their extinction. She believes that she can lead a new generation that won't destroy themselves in a war of conquest like her people had done in the past. It's not clear if she's to be believed or not, and that's the point. Is she a monster or not? Is she friend or foe? Is she like the Thorian, an ancient creature trapped by her nature, unable to be reasoned with? Or is she like the Turians, once an adversary, but now, as Caden would describe them, simply capable of good or bad like any of us? Does she deserve to live or die? The game doesn't judge you for either decision, but your companions will definitely let you know what they think. And why wouldn't they? They're people and a diverse group, each with their own opinions and feelings. Rex is a Krogan, and the Krogan were on the front lines of fighting the Rachni in past generations. His people despise the memory of the Rachni. Alternatively, Liara, a student of history and a member of the more pacifist race, feels like the Rachni being wiped out last time was going too far and is actually genocide. And this is a chance to atone for the galaxy's overzealous wrath. To this day, the decision to free or spare the Rachni is still one of the most hotly debated topics in the Mass Effect fan community. There are pros and cons to either approach, but the reason why I'm covering the particulars of the dilemma now is to once again illustrate that the thematic resonance remains intact either way. The dilemma is nebulous enough that you're not wrong for thinking of the Rachni queen as a monster, but neither are you wrong for thinking of her as a species worthy of freedom. In fact, the nebulous nature of the decision actually takes on its own unique thematic resonance, and that is that sometimes you can't tell between monster and alien. What if you're too afraid and kill out of aggression for fear of being betrayed? But alternatively, what if you're too naive and you put the entire galaxy at risk because you were beguiled by a monster that played the victim to secure its own release? Neither one of these outcomes is good, and yet you're going to have to choose. The game doesn't immediately make it clear whether you've made the right or wrong choice, and so you're left to wonder. When we started this discussion, it all seemed so clear, didn't it? The monster and the rocket, the ultimate fear and hope. Who knew that the line between those two could be so blurred? Whatever you choose, you leave Novaria to continue on your hunt of Saren. The events of the plot turn in a way where a new destination opens up to you, a planet called Vermeier, where a Solarian task force has tracked down Saren. Unlike Novaria, which was a type of hell, and Pharaohs, which was a pseudo-potential paradise, Vermeier is an actual paradise. It's a young planet in a habitable life zone of its solar system with a wide equatorial band. It's got mild temperatures, tropical climate, crystal clear water, and verdant, lush foliage. It's ripe for the picking as far as colonization projects are concerned, but its position near the Attican Traverse, a largely unsettled and lawless part of the galaxy, mean colonization has always been put on pause due to risks. Despite that, when you land on Vermeier, it's clear that it's perhaps the most utopian place you've traveled to so far. How fitting, then, thematically, that it's the place when you finally confront the monster directly. Up to this point, the Reapers had been a far-off threat, unknowable and distant. Although we witnessed a Reaper on Eden Prime and saw its destructive capabilities, it's been a shadow of a threat since then. On Vermeier, you find that Saren is continuing his research into mind control and conducting experiments on its effects. You infiltrate and ultimately fight your way into his facility and find something he's kept tucked away near his personal office: a Prothean beacon. There was a Prothean beacon on Eden Prime, and that's partly how this whole thing got started. Saren used the Prothean beacon on Eden Prime because he was searching for what the beacon pointed to, but when you, as Shepard, used it, your mind was only flooded with images you couldn't understand, alien encoded information meant for the mind of a Prothean. If Saren had another beacon on Vermeier, it meant he must be getting closer to whatever he was searching for. So when you use the beacon, it gives you another vision you don't understand, but more than that, it awakens a transmission between the beacon and Sovereign, the Reaper ship that attacked Eden Prime. And it's really not just a Reaper ship, but as we all know now, an actual Reaper. Sovereign is the monster. Unlike the Thorian or the Rachni Queen, Sovereign isn't just ancient or predetermined in its nature, it's actually unknowable up to this point. When you ask it how it came to be, it says there's no point in explaining that to you because you wouldn't understand. If you ask what it wants, it essentially tells you its plans are beyond your comprehension. It's only talking to you because you stumbled upon a means to communicate with it. It perceives you as a nuance and an aberration, a fly in the ointment. In what is now an iconic line in the series, Sovereign declares, "You exist because we allow it, and you will end because we demand it." The Reapers don't even regard you as an enemy. They regard you as part of an equation that needs to be balanced out. This is a function they have performed for eons, and even if they once had a creator, their existence and their ability to wipe out an entire galaxy is now tantamount to a cosmic level event, no less unavoidable or dispassionate than a black hole or a supernova. This is not the sort of enemy you seek to understand. Saren ultimately escapes Vermeier, and Sovereign has little patience for your interruption. And then the plot, in a way that's slightly convoluted and not directly related to theme, takes you to your next destination while hunting Saren, a planet called Ilos. And it's on Ilos you discover the remnants of a paradise lost, the wake of destruction from when the last time the Reapers perpetrated their cosmic cleansing on the galaxy. It's a solemn reminder of what happens when the monster wins. While exploring Ilos in pursuit of Saren, you encounter a Prothean AI named Vigil. The conversation with Vigil is often cited as one of the best moments of Mass Effect, and while a large part of that is really related to world building, lore, and plot, some of it is related to theme. Vigil tells you what happened to the Protheans, about their war with the Reapers, about their attempts to contend with the monster. It's sad and terrible, but also enlightening. Vigil shares with you some of their fatal mistakes, and in a revelation that's crucial for both plot and theme, he lets you in on a big secret about the Citadel. The Citadel, the ultimate paradise you first visited at the beginning of your adventure, is actually a trap set by the Reapers. It was created by the Reapers and can ultimately be controlled by the Reapers. The Citadel is actually a mass relay that allows travel from outside the galaxy, a hidden connection to the depths of dark space. In each cycle, when the Reapers return every 50,000 years to purge the galaxy of intelligent life, they use the Citadel to return into the heart of galactic society. Such a devastating strike is what crippled the Protheans. Remember Pharaohs and Zoo's Hope, the monster lurking underneath what could be a paradise? The Citadel trap is the same concept writ large. The best place in the galaxy, the ultimate paradise, is actually the ultimate trap set by the ultimate monster. The monster and the rocket seemed like such a simple concept before we realized just how devious the monster is. Vigil tells you that despite their own impending doom, the Protheans found a way to sabotage the Reapers' control of the Citadel before the Reapers finished destroying their society. Basically, the Reapers can activate the Citadel from dark space, letting themselves in when the time is right to begin the cycle of destruction again, but the Protheans broke that link, so now the Reapers can't remotely activate it. That's why they need Saren, who is now indoctrinated, essentially brainwashed, by a Reaper signal emanating from Sovereign. This indoctrination signal is why Saren was so interested in researching mind control, because he fears it's taking him over completely, and he's right. Even if he tried to fight back, it's too late for him. He's going to let the Reapers in unless Shepard and crew stop him. And they get the chance to stop him because of the sacrifice of the Protheans. The final living Protheans died deactivating that remote Reaper signal into the Citadel. It was the last thing that their species did, and it wasn't going to be enough to save their own species. It was only going to be enough to save the species in the next cycle, to save humans and Solarians and Asari and Turians and all the rest. It was an incredible act of sacrifice, an incredible act of defiance. And it's really the Prothean sacrifice, the sabotage of the Reaper remote mechanism, that makes up the catalyst for the thematic resonance and the closing of Mass Effect 1. Without the Protheans and their plan, you wouldn't have been able to stop the Reapers. They would have remotely activated the Citadel and come in en masse, and that would have been it. We wouldn't have stood a chance any more than the Protheans did. Basically, the whole time we were chasing Saren, he was looking for the Mu relay in order to get to Ilos and get into the Citadel without being noticed. Saren had to get to a lost ancient planet in order to do the bidding of the Reapers, and Shepard and crew had to do the same in order to stop it. That means that at the end of the day, it was exploration to a planet once thought lost and the retrieval of ancient knowledge that led to the defeat of Sovereign at the Citadel. If Shepard and the crew of the Normandy hadn't traveled through the galaxy, if they hadn't found the Mu relay, if they hadn't gone to Ilos and found Vigil and learned the secret of the Citadel, the Reapers and Saren would have won. The heroes won because the rocket took them to a place that no one had been to in 50,000 years, the final bastion against the monster. And then, with that ancient knowledge in hand, the heroes returned to the paradise of the Citadel to prevent Saren from letting it be used as a trap. Explore the unknown, find the unfindable, gain ancient knowledge, defend paradise, defeat the monster. I can't think of a more fitting end to a story in the context of the monster and the rocket. It's not just that the Normandy takes the final shot against Sovereign during the space battle, although that is epic. It's that the exploration into long-lost reaches of space saved the galaxy. Yes, it took a large fleet of ships from the different species to defeat Sovereign and the Geth ships following it, but in order for the Citadel fleet to even have a fighting chance, Shepard had to stop Saren from opening the Citadel relay and allowing in thousands more Reapers. It was exploration that saved the galaxy. It was a crew of humans and aliens facing the unknown that won the day. The rocket defeated the monster not with a shot across the bow, but with a brilliant streak across the stars. What a fitting conclusion. This has been The Exalted March, conversation about storytelling and design in video games. If you'd like this video, please consider hitting the like button. And if you'd like to be informed of all future videos, please consider hitting the subscribe button and also maybe clicking that little bell notification icon, since the YouTube algorithm is not particularly kind to channels such as mine that don't upload quite as frequently. This is a video that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition remaster is of course coming out soon. I asked people on Twitter and here on YouTube what sort of videos they would like to see around that, whether they want to see more lore videos, whether they want to see gameplay videos, character deep dives, what have you. But then I realized that this video has kind of been one of those things that I've always kind of had on the back burner. It's one of those essential foundational videos that I'm kind of surprised I hadn't done a lot sooner. And I really just wanted to use this to lay the groundwork for people to really, truly understand, I think, the core of what makes Mass Effect so special. And now that we've got this sort of set up as a base, we can dive into the more lore-specific, plot-specific, character-specific, even gameplay-related stuff going forward. But I wanted to really get this one knocked out and share it with you guys. So I hope that you all appreciate it. I hope that you have found it useful as far as better understanding this franchise and this game that so many of us love. And also, just let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below, and let me know what videos you'd like to see heading into the release of the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. As always, thanks for watching, and thank you for listening.